Hi, my name's Corinne Brad and welcome to the Crafts channel. Now, if you're anything like me, you've got a whole stash of really horrible towels and tea towels in the cupboard under the sink that you can't throw away because they are quite handy for mopping up spills, but they're so horrible that you can't even give them to the local rescue. I've found a way of turning hideous, stained, manky old towels into something that's really quite nice, which is this quilted bath mat. Now, this is a plus sign design, which when I first looked at it, I thought, how on earth do you get all those crosses to interlock like that? But it's really easy. So I've made this. It's backed with a double layer of an old towel that really was a bit rough and a bit horrible. But it's made a whole new lease of life because it's cotton. It will still absorb your wet footprints in the bath. And you know you've done something right when your daughter's gone, oh, I like that. I'm going to take that with me to university. So that's good. So I'm going to do a plus sign design with some other fabrics. I've got a great little collection here from Art Gallery Fabric that's a sort of bohemian range. And you need to cut several 5cm squares. So they are 4 centimetres with a 5mm seam allowance around each side. And you need some 5 by 13 centimetre rectangles. So when you take your 5mm from around each side, they'll come down to 12 by 4, so that you can make a perfect cross shape when they are sewn together with those seam allowances. If you're working in imperial sizes, you want it about 2 inches by 5¼ inches, and then that will come down once you've taken your 1/4 inch seam allowance off. And you need to lay them out in a dot dot dash arrangement. I will explain what I mean by that. So you've got a dot, and you've got a dash, and you've got a dot dot, and a dash. Oh, let's just move them across a bit. And a final dot. To build the pattern up, you then need to, and I've sewn these for speed, make sure that each dash has got a dot of the same colour. I'll just move that down a bit. Each dash has got a dot of the same colour above and below it. And then as you build the design up, you will notice that your crosses all go up, or they come down from top left to bottom right, all in that direction. So each dash has got a dot of the same colour above and below it. And you sew them together with a 5mm seam allowance. Let me just rescue my wandering machine foot, and I'll show you how quick it is to sew them together. So place them right sides together, and I'm set my machine. It's a straight stitch. It's about 2.5mm long. Locking stitch at the start, straight down with a 5mm seam allowance, and it's always wise to cut your fiddly ends off as you go along, because otherwise they just get in the way. And let's just do these very quickly. And you don't have to be too precise when you're sewing these together. I mean, this is a great project just to get you confident on a sewing machine if you've never sewn before, because it's all straight line stitching, it's all straight line cutting, and really the placement of your colours, it's just like putting a jigsaw together. You know, if you're lucky enough to have a big enough area, you can lay your whole mat out to start with before you sew it together. And provided you don't have a cat that's liable to jump on top of it and kick it everywhere. Or if you don't have the space, just lay it out on the floor, take a snapshot with your phone so you know the arrangement of your colours, and work from that. So there you go. We have these strips that now interlock to make the cross shape, like the plus sign shape. And what you'll notice, and this is why it's another good idea for beginners, is there's not an awful lot of places where you need to line up those vertical seams. We've got one here, there's one here, one there, one there. So if you are a beginner, and I mean, I must admit, if I'm in a hurry, I just tend to stitch and go and then go, oh, I really should have lined that up better. But if you're, if you're a beginner, what you can do is just make sure that that seam that needs to line up lines up properly and pin it. And then, to be honest, the other seams, if they're a couple of millimetres out, you're not going to notice. I'll show you why. Hold on. Just stop where you've put the pin to make sure you don't run over the pin, because you'll either bend the pin or break your needle. Pins I can cope with, broken needles are slightly more expensive. So once you've sewn those two pieces together, as I say, the only seam that needed to match up was this one here, because this goes into a dash, these two go into a dash, they go into a dash. So it's not the end of the world if you're slightly out. Again, with this one, I've got two seams that need to match up. So if you pin those, then you know you're on track. And if your 5mm seam allowance isn't a perfect 5mm all the way through, again with me, I tend to use the side of my presser foot as a guide, but if I'm sewing and watching TV, I don't always look at what I'm doing. And I'm sure there's many of you out there that do exactly the same thing. Oh. Foot pedals sliding all over the floor again. Oh, that should be my next project, a non-slip foot pedal cover. So as you can see, that lines up. And that's not as good as it could be, but we'll just gloss over that. And then you would sew that to bottom. So it builds up really, really quickly, and when you decide how big you want your mat to be, any excess dash you can just cut off with a rotary cutter. So what you end up with is something like this, which I really like. Now this is very small for a bath mat, which is why it's not going to be a bath mat, it's going to be a draining board mat, so that when I stack things up on the draining board, they don't all slide off, and I can put one mug down and put all the plates on it and they'll stay in place. This has quite simply been backed with 2 layers of toweling from those manky old towels that I showed you earlier. What I will suggest you do though is, if you've got towels that have got this sort of woven trim on it, cut that off, because it tends to suck your towel in a bit and you won't get a nice flat bit. But you can always use them as garden ties, another use for them. As you can see, it's cut it in a bit where I haven't cut that one off, but we all learn by our mistakes. And then it's quite simply been quilted by following the lines of the design. So rather than quilt round every single cross, if you go down across like this, and then you can go like this, and it's outlined every cross perfectly, but it hasn't sewn over your dashes here. So that's how you make your mat, whether it's a bath mat or a draining board mat, and then all you need to do is bind it, and I'll show you that now. So to bind a simple quilted mat like this, or any quilt you know, larger scale. I don't ever buy bias binding. Bias binding, if you're dressmaking, it's probably imperative that you get it because it's cut on the bias, so it stretches around necklines and armholes. But I just buy 100% cotton, and then I'll cut myself a 3-4 centimetre wide strip from it, and then I'll sew it. I'll lay it against each other. Move that so you can actually see what I'm talking about. If you get the two ends, put them at a right angle, sew diagonally across it and cut that bit off. You've then got a nice continuous strip. But when you come to bind it, what it means is you don't have a bulk of joining strip. You've managed to stretch that bulk over 3 centimetres, so it makes a much cleaner edge. So here we have this continuous strip. And I tend to sew on the back of my quilt first of all, so I can then top stitch on the front. But make sure that you've got your binding the wrong way up. And we will simply start in the middle of one edge, and don't sew the first, I don't know, 5 centimetres of your binding. I'll show you why. Again, 5mm seam allowance. Make sure everything is pressed and that your layers are together. And we'll just race around this quilt with the binding. You might find you want to change to a jeans weight needle or something like that because you're going through 2 layers of toweling and 2 layers of cotton. Basically, if your machine starts going bang, 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 then you know you need a sharper needle or a thicker needle. And I'm just going to sew to this corner and back it off, because I just want to show you the best way to mitre a corner. So you've gone to the corner, you've left yourself 5mm to go. If you take your binding and fold it back at 45 degrees, and then fold it forward again so it lines up, let's just pop a pin in there. So you've got this corner of fabric, and then start your stitching again, taking care, you don't have to go right into the corner. You just want to make sure that when you turn it out, which I'll show you in a minute, you've got a nice clean turnout. Just going to adjust my press foot a bit to make sure it actually is grabbing that fabric. And again, just stop 5mm from the end. I'll show you what I mean by that corner. When you turn it out, you've got a nice, neat corner. And if you sew too far, you'll catch that corner in a stitch, and it's not insurmountable, but it's easier to do it this way. So again, take your binding out at 45 degrees, fold it back again so that it lines up, and just pin it. And that's really the only pinning you need to do when you're binding a quilt like this. When it's a straight edge, to be honest, you waste so much time pinning and then taking the pins out, and you will need to pin quite a lot in the next step of the binding, so you might as well save some time while you can. And I am going to bind right around this quilt so I can show you why you've left this sort of 3 or 4 centimetres at the beginning. About there. Okay. Oh no, I've still got another corner to go yet. Got a feeling I've set my machine foot too slow. because I normally whip round much quicker than this. So we're going to sew, and again we're just going to stop just shy of where we started, and then I'll show you how to join this to make a perfect continuous binding. So you've got a gap here. Now trim your binding a decent amount, and what you want to do is you want to just finger press where that binding will join. Now in an ideal world you would want to do a diagonal join on this as well, but I've not yet mastered the art of doing that in one smooth motion, so I am just going to do a straight bind on this. Oh, I can't even do that at the minute. Hold on a minute. Let's finger press them, and let's use a pin. To pin where you want to join it. This is possibly the trickiest part of this quilt, because you have the bulk of the quilt, and if you've got a massive quilt and no decent table, it will be weighing you down. But it is well worth doing it this way, so that your finished edge, cut that axis off, you know, it's a continuous line. There's no obvious gap where you started and stopped binding your quilt. So once you've joined that, then just go back to your initial seam line and sew right to the end, like this. So you've bound the back, you've mitered all your corners, so you can just pop them through like so. And then if you finger press 5mm on your binding, like so, fold it up to the top and pin it. And make sure that when you've done this, you can see this line here, which is where your stitching is from the back. Make sure that the folded edge of your binding covers that stitch line, so it all looks nice and neat. And when you come to a corner with a million pieces of thread on it, where the hell have they come from? Again, finger press the adjacent side, fold it up, and that corner will just mite it in there like so for a perfect finish. Now I'm not going to fold and pin all of this, but I am just going to show you how easy it is to stitch once it is folded and pinned. And this is what I mean, you do need to pin it. If you you'll just get in a muddle if you try and do this off the cuff, as it were. And also what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the colour of my thread, because I'd really like the top of this quilt to look as if it's an invisible bind. That will do. It's not quite invisible, but it's close enough. Oh. In truth, I tend to sew most things in just a white cotton, especially for demonstrations, because a lot of the time it's easier for you to see where the white stitching is on a coloured fabric. But this isn't just a demonstration model, this is going to become part of my house, so it needs to be the best that it can be. Right, I'm going to put my reading glasses on for this so I can see where I'm sewing, because what I'm going to do is the central line of my presser foot, I'm just going to sew so that this inside fold of the fabric is 1 mil to the left of it. And you do need to keep an eye on this. There's no point trying to watch TV while you're doing this, because you need to make sure that you're keeping your work dead straight for the neatest finish possible. But also bear in mind you are now sewing through almost 4 layers of cotton and 2 layers of toweling. Put your needle into pivot. And we'll end it there. So as you can see, you've got a nice neat finish. Oh look, that was a bit shoddy. And on the back you've just got the white thread, but it's not so noticeable because that's going to go against your draining board. So when it's completely bound, it will end up looking like this larger scale bathroom mat. So I hope you like that. Really nice plus sign design, recycled bath towel, kitchen towel, tea towel, whatever you like. Drainer mat. Great little project, and it's a great little scrap buster as well, because the pieces of fabric that you need are so small to start with. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope to see your efforts, and I hope that we can start a whole new movement of not getting rid of horrible old towels, and we will catch you next time. Cheers. If you've been inspired to create, please share your makes with us in the comments section below. And if you've enjoyed videos by the Crafts channel, hit the like button. Want to see more of us? Then click subscribe. See you next time.